So task 4 is one of the 2 written questions. You'll be task 8 in budgeting. Budget is quite an easy one in terms of mark allocation. There's 8 tasks and they're all worth 20 marks. So this one is 20 marks. You're spending the same amount of time on each question. Now, the thing, before we get started, the thing I remember with revisions, with written questions is these are marked by a human. Humans cost money. Why are AAT paying human markers for written questions when a lot of the questions can be marked automatically? It is because they're testing things that they cannot test in the numerical stuff. So if you just give me a load of numbers, you're not going to do particularly well, because we can know you can calculate numbers or not from the automatically typed questions. We're looking for you to explain, what is causing the numbers and what effect will that have. And that theory applies to all written questions, not just budgeting. So if you just chuck at the marker a load of percentages of figures and things like that, you are, without any commentary, you are not going to get really many marks. The numbers are there to show significance and back up your argument, but they're not the main point that we are looking for. Cool. So we're going to have a look at task 4 from our budgeting mock, and we're just going to work our way there. Now, obviously in the exam, you would type your answers up. I've got one of these scribbly pens, but we're just going to work through these and chat and talk about the numbers, what's caused them, what do they mean, and and if we're really showing off, try and link the numbers as well. Cool. So, can you all see my screen? Should be able to see. Oh, it says here's an example to practice. You all see that? Okay. Cool. So here we have an example to practice. So we've got a draft raw materials budget, and there's nearly always a bit of commentary to it, which sort of explains. And we just need to go through here and make sure we're answering every part of the question. So the production manager and the purchasing manager, they are not the same people here, have decided to switch to a new, cheaper supplier. So the price of material is going down, but it's less effective. And we want to look at how much so in this question. So the quality of material will fall, which increase wastage. Longer lead time for delivery means inventory needs to be increased because it takes longer to come. And then we've been asked to recommend performance indicators. So we're just going to go through and answer each question in parts. So the first thing we've asked to do is request approval for the budget and explain the assumptions upon which it is based. So we're given the budget, and I try not to think very hard about this. I basically like to start at the top and just work my way down. So we need to put these in relatively coherent sentences. Now you can get away with bullet points, that is fine, but ideally you want a nice intro and nice, well explained sentences. But given that we haven't got much space and I've only got a pen, we're just going to talk through these and sort of say what's the effect of these and what is causing them. So starting at the top, the actual number of units has gone up. Now, we want to show by how much that has gone up, because then that shows significance. And then this figure here allows us to then make a further comparison. So it's gone from 20,000 to 22,500, which is a rise of 12.5%. So that's gone up by 12.5%. Don't want you to do is tell me that it's gone up by 12.5%. You don't have to be a particularly well-educated accountant to say one number is 12.5% bigger than another. What we then want to do is take it further. So my first point would be production has gone up by 12.5%. All things being equal, that will further increase the need for material, because the more you produce, the more material you need. It's straightforward as that. So the production has gone up by 12.5%. this will increase the need for material. Again, material per unit has gone up from 0.5 to 0.6 kilos per unit. So that is up by 20%. And once again, we want to say material per unit is up by 20%. This will mean that there is a rise in demand for material, because if you're using more material per unit, it's going to need more material. It's as simple as that. Now, this one here, what percentage rise is it in material loss? How much has that risen by? Does anyone want to tell me how much of a rise the material loss has gone up by? Because this is an important point. So it was 10%, now it's 15%. Yes, so it's gone up by 5 percentage points. However, the amount of material that has now been wasted has risen by 50%. So you can see 5% is actually 50% of what was previously being wasted. So there's actually a rise of wastage per unit of increase of 50%. So when you want to make it clear that if you're saying it's a 5% rise, it's a 5 percentage points, or the wastage has risen by 50%. So make sure you talk clear with your answer. So material loss has risen by 50%. This will again increase the need for material. So again, we need to carry on working our way down. So the material required for production has gone from £11,111 to 15,882. So we get 15,882. Take away 11,123 means it's gone up by 4,771. So divide that by 11,111 means that has risen by, that's gone up by 42.9%. Now, obviously, that will increase the cost, but what we want to say here is this has probably been driven by the increase in production of units, the material per unit, and the wastage per unit. So here we're going to say what has caused this. You can see closing inventory has gone up. So 200 has gone up by 200 divided by 750, which is a rise of 26.6%. So I'll just come back to that, Eva. So 26.6%. This is because the new supplier means that we have longer lead times, therefore we've got to hold more stock. So here we're going to talk about what's caused it. So Eva, was it the material required for production or the material loss? You want me to go over again? The 50%. So you can see here, it was originally 10%. It's gone up by 5%, gone to 15. So 5 divided by 10 is actually a rise of 50%. It's actually doubled. No, it's not doubled at all. It's gone up by 50%. So it's an absolute rise of 5%, but as a percentage of what we were wasting for, it's gone up by 50%. And then moving down, we've got purchases in kilos. Remember, working in kilos. So 16082 minus 11,161 has risen by 11,161. By a whopping, that's gone up. The amount of material we're going to buy is up by 44.1%. So you can see that is going to increase our costs. So don't just say what it's done, say what it's going to do. And coming towards the end of this section now, you can see the actual price. This is where we are saving some money for once. It's gone from £2.25 to £1.65, a fall of 60p, which 60p, remember, you also divide what it's moved by what it was. So 60p divided by 2.25 is a price decrease of 26.6%. And you'll see, and what you'll do is say, this was because we bought some cheaper material. Now, this is where you want to start really showing off and linking it to other things and say, this will go some way to alleviate the extra costs because we have to use more material per unit. We are wasting more. So that's gone down by 26%, and we can say that that will offset some of the other increased costs. And then lastly, the big important one is by how much has the material purchases gone up by. So it's gone 26,535 minus 25,112 divided by 25,112 means that has gone up by 5.6%. So what do we think? Do we think that is a good thing or a bad thing? The fact that total purchases for the period has gone up by 5.6%. Obviously, costs going up have gone up, but do we think they've made a good decision or a bad decision? Well, 50-50 chance of getting it right. Good or bad? Well, costs going up generally isn't a good thing. However, remember, right at the beginning, we looked at production units. So if we've made no changes whatsoever to the original, to what we're originally doing, all things being equal, if the production goes up by 12.5%, you would expect the costs to go up by 12.5%. So in this case, the production's got up by 12.5%. The costs have only risen by 5.6%. So actually, whilst they've gone up, they haven't gone up as much as the actual production. So in this case, the company is better off looking at this. Now, there are some other considerations like, will we have to reduce our selling price because the material isn't as good, or will it not make any difference? So there are other considerations, but looking at this, the company has made a good decision that whilst the costs are gone up by 5.6%, they've managed to produce 12.5% more of goods to sell. So that's gone well. Cool. Any questions on that? Cool. Right. Now we've been asked to suggest 4 appropriate performance indicators other than a variance to monitor raw material costs. So emphasis on the verb here, suggest. So it's not identify, so it's not explain, or we're not looking for long form answers. We're just looking for 4 things that are performance indicators. And what are performance indicators? It's anything that you can measure, really. So you can measure it and say it's doing well or it isn't. So one of the things we could measure is, get rid of that. So what would I measure? I would measure material per unit. You can see if that's what we aim for, and that's what we've got. That's fine, or we haven't beat it. And you can say you met the target or you haven't. The amount of material lost per unit. So that's what you assume you're going to lose based on what you think, but you can measure that and say, did we actually lose 15% of our material, or was it less, which is a good thing, or was it more, in which case we've got a problem. You can also measure inventory levels. You know, have you got enough inventory all the time? Have you got stock outs and things like that? And then the other thing you can measure is price per kilo. Now these just literally what I've just come up with, but these can be anything. As long as you can measure them, it's a performance indicator. So and again, we are just asking you to suggest them. We don't want any explanation or anything like that, or what they do, or why you've chosen these ones. Just suggest 4 things that you can measure, and that's that question done. It's a very, very short question, that point. 4 little things, 4 marks probably. Whereas the next question, we've been asked to explain, which means we're looking for a lot longer questions. Now, if you were to explain your performance indicators, that's great. You'd probably get all the marks, but you wouldn't get any more marks than if you just gave me 4 performance indicators. So you wouldn't gain extra marks by giving me extra there, but this bit here, you want to make sure you get all the marks, and we're going to explain the planning assumptions. So explain which ones are based on forecasts and which these are not totally within the production manager's control. So does anyone want to tell me which of these figures in our budget are a forecast? Any suggestions? Which of these have we assumed we think we'll get right? Change to a different colour, shall we? So again, I just work through and think, you know, is that a fact, or has someone suggested that? So the production units, I would say that is a forecast. You don't know you're going to sell 22,500 units. It's an estimate. I would think it's very unlikely you get that one exactly right. Then we've got material per unit. Again, that could be a forecast. It could be that we think we go to a cheaper material, that the material we use per unit will go up by 20% to 0.6 kilos. But we've not used this material before. We don't know for certain. So that there is a forecast. Likewise with material loss. Yeah, it could well be that you're wasting 15%, but you don't know that. And that could bring in a variety of factors. It's not just the material, it's also your experience for how you work with it and things like that. And then price per kilo. Now, I'd be a bit more hesitant to suggest this one because it could be agreed in advance. But unless you've got it written down in a contract, and even then in contracts, there can be things like we will adjust it at certain times for inflation, and you don't know what inflation will be. But again, that could well be a forecast. So as long as you can suggest an answer and come up with a sensible reason why that might be sensible, they will give you the marks. So again, with these sort of things, I would want to see it sort of a good 4 things that you've identified and explained. And then lastly, we've been asked for things that are not within the production manager's control. Because so remember, we talked about there's the production manager and the purchasing manager. So in this case, the purchasing manager is the person who buys the material, and the production manager is in charge of actually turning that material into finished goods. So which of these things are not going to be under the control of the production manager? Anyone want to suggest any? Cool. Right. So the production manager, well, we presumably, if we've got down, we're such a large company, we've got a production manager and a purchasing manager, we've probably got a sales manager as well. So the actual number of units we're going to produce will be directly linked to the number of units that we sell. And the units we sell are outside of the production manager's control. They can't influence that a great deal. Obviously, they don't want to produce more than you need because that's just a waste. And you'd hope they can produce enough to meet demand. But the actual demand there is not really within the production manager's control. Now, the material per unit and the material loss, I'm going to lump together. Now, to a degree, these are within the production manager's control. However, the quality of the material is not. The production manager has to use whatever material that they are given by the purchasing manager. So that could well be little bits of that not within the production manager's control. Yeah, exactly. The price per kilo There's nothing to do with the production manager. It's just nothing to do with them, because it's the purchasing manager who does that. They have no say whatsoever. So yeah, I would definitely suggest that. And then the other thing I would also look, because I also like to give 4 points for each of these, is then again, I'd go back to material, I think my pen to work, material per unit and material loss per unit. So what else could mean that we don't use 0.6 kilos or waste 15% of our material that is not in the production manager's control? This is quite a tricky one, but one of the things that is outside the production manager's control is probably the HR team. So they're in charge of recruitment, and they might give you some really, really good workers, in which case they probably don't waste as much. Or they might give you some particularly less able workers, should we say, in which case they do waste more. And you can only do so much with what you've got. I mean, you can only do so much training with the production manager. So again, that there is, to a degree, can be outside the production manager's control. But like all written questions, if you've got a sensible point and explain why it's sensible, they will give you a mark. And that is exactly why we have human markers, because there is, if you do a written question and you look at the model answer, if it's not word for word the same, don't assume that you won't have got any marks, because there's lots of good explanations that you could possibly give. And as long as they're sensible, you will get the marks. If it's not sensible, you won't get the marks, really. So that's what we'd sort of look for in a question like this. So it's worth 20 marks. And remember, these figures here, the percentages, they are important because they show significance. But what we're not looking for is for you to say production went up 12.5%. You don't need to be a level 4 accountant to do that. You need to say, A, if you can, what caused it, and B, if you can, what effects it have. So production going up by 12.5% isn't interesting. Production going up by 12.5%, and this will mean we'll need to use more material, is more interesting. So make a point and tell me why it's interesting, why you're making that point. And that is task 4. Not a bad one, I don't think. I think it's better than task 8. Cool. Any questions on that whilst we're here? Or any questions on anything while we're here? Cool. Right, I will send out. Can you write too much? Really good question. The answer to that is you can, Eva. You can write too much, because remember, these tasks are marked by humans, different humans, and some people mark differently. So there is a very tight mark scheme, and the markers have to work for that. So here it's worth 20 marks, and the mark scheme will be, although you might not see it, the mark scheme will be something like 12 marks there, 4 marks there, and 4 marks there, say. And if you write loads and loads and loads, and it's a really good answer, and you get all 12 marks, if you carry on, you will still only get 12 marks. And they cannot sort of move the marks from there to there and go, oh, they kept giving me good points, so I'll give you some more marks. The marks are physically not there. So all you're doing at that point is wasting time. So if it's something like identify 4 performance indicators, do not give us more than 4. They'll only look at the first 4 because they'll think you're just going down a scattergun approach, and it's just eating time. So be very careful that you've written enough, but don't go to the nth degree. And I'm very sort of quite militant with my time. So I would write, it's not too bad in budgeting because they're all worth 20 marks. But, I would normally, maybe not write it on the paper because we're on a computer, but, times it now, 1828 it is now. That's the time I've got on this paper. And then if you're running over that time, leave it, go on to another question where you can probably pick up easier marks on them. And if you've got time, come back to it. But you're not, when you go on an exam day, you're not there to turn in a perfect task 1 to 4 and not have time for tasks 5, 6, 7, and 8. What you want is a good, i.e. above 70% tasks 1 to 8. So writing loads and loads and loads is not what we want. We want you to write enough to get the marks and then move on, because writing more will not get you all the marks. There's only 20 marks available, and those 20 marks will be broken down further. And once you've got the marks available, they won't just magic some more out of thin air. Cool. Cool. Any other questions? Okay. Would you do written tasks first? Really good question. Generally, when I've gone about exams, you can't afford to skip a question. Let's be honest. So I've always taken the view that you've got to do every question. So I would start from task 1 and we'll work our way through task 8. However, I do know that lots of students go down the route of do all the numerical stuff first, where they think they can probably get it a little bit in under time. And then on the time you've got left is for your written tasks. Because the danger with the written task is you think, I'll write another sentence, I'll get another mark. And that is not how it works. You've probably gone off a tangent and you've stopped writing coherent sentences, or you've got all the marks. So once you've got the numerical stuff done, if you do carry on writing, it's not really to the detriment of all the other tasks. They're already done. Like I say, in budgeting, you've got 8 tasks, all with 20 marks. Generally, I would either start from task 1 and work to task 8, or I'd do the numerical stuff first. The danger with the written task first is you write, and then you've got enough time left for the numerical stuff. So I personally, if I was to not do one way, it would be, I would not start with written task first. But everyone's different, and if it works for you, typically I would start from the beginning. But if you've got like a favorite task, say, I don't know, task 6 maybe, if you want to do that first and settle your nerves, and you think, I've got some marks on the board and you're good at that task, and you think you can maybe do it in less time than is allocated, that might be worth doing. And then that leaves you a bit of leeway on maybe some of the more difficult tasks, and just calm yourself. You get a bit done, it's a friendly task, and then you tackle the more difficult ones later on. Cool. Anyone for anything else whilst we're here? I think it's me next week for budgeting. Can't remember, but we'll probably be moving. We'll be doing task 5 next week. Cool. Right. Good luck if you've got an exam in the next week. If not, hopefully I will see you here this time next week, and I will get the recording sent out. Cool. Bye, everyone.